Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection, your weekly public affairs program here on Catamount Radio. All 5 of our Catamount radio stations broadcast this. I'm Brian Collamore, your host for the 1-hour show each week, and we like to speak with community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and political arenas on basically getting everybody up to speed with whatever it is that's going on, not just throughout the state, but also specifically in Rutland County. And our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we're looking forward already to next August and the 180th Vermont State Fair here in Rutland. Not sure who will be there. We had a great time this year and very well-attended fair, and hopefully next year even better. The weather plays such an important role there, and this year we had some very warm weather during the fair, and we still are looking for some rain. We're recording this. I say we. Mike Doenges is going to join us here in a second. So we're recording this on the 17th of September, and it will air on the 21st. And as we record it, I did look ahead a little bit to the weather, and it doesn't look like we're going to get any relief. We are in, I think, probably a very serious drought situation. I'm kind of surprised that we haven't heard anything from, and maybe I can make that the first question of Mike. You know, usually if you're in this kind of situation, somebody from the water department will say, hey, conserve, you know, but I haven't heard anything, and I'm on city water, so I didn't know whether that meant that we're okay, or whether, I don't know what it means. Anyway, Mike Doenges is with us, the mayor of the city of Rutland, and yeah, we need some rain badly. I think if it doesn't happen soon, it may even impact the foliage this year, which seems to be really, really muted. You're not seeing those bright colors. Now, I realize, you know, we're still in the middle of September, so maybe, you know, things haven't changed yet. The way they will down the road. Anyway, Michael, welcome in. Good to have you with us. And how are things?
Things are great. Things are great, Brian. Thanks for having me back. Yes, I'm just texting our DPW guys now
Mike,
to ask about the waters. So I'll get you an answer before the show's over.
Okay.
But one of the things, you know, I've received a couple emails just in the past few days, especially with the article that Keith wrote in the Herald the other day about drought conditions, saying, look, we're looking at like areas of Pine Hill Park. A lot of the city is wooded, and are we concerned about fire, right? And so, yes, you know, inside the city limits, you're not supposed to have campfires unless they're contained. We have very specific ordinances about it. You know, you can use your grill, gas fires, things like that are okay. Even in those situations, people should be careful right now, right? One errant spark could light up a blaze, and
sure,
we want to be careful. So, you know, just, you know, until it rains a little bit more, until we get these drought conditions down, we have to be cautious. And my fire chief and I had just started talking about that this week.
Yeah,
so.
I've been watching the Weather Channel, and as far as I understand, this is as serious a drought as we've ever experienced in Vermont. And not just here, throughout the New England states. I mean, it's really bad. Obviously, the lawns have taken the summer off or the fall off a long time ago. I mean, everybody's lawn is brown, but beyond that, it seems like something's just really out of whack.
Well, talk about a change in patterns, right? Like, so the past 2 years, we've had major flooding in the summer.
Yeah.
The year before that, it just rained all summer. There wasn't flooding issues, but it just wouldn't stop raining. Yep. And now we are complete drought. And, you know, you look at El Nino and the weather patterns and how they affect us, because we do kind of catch all the different weather patterns across the globe. The Northeast, you know, we pretty consistently are affected by everybody else and what's going on. It's interesting to see these changes.
Yeah.
One thing that everybody's predicting, though, for this winter, which I think will be good for tourism, is a mass amount of snow.
Okay.
Because of this. So hopefully we see a benefit on the other side of all of this current dry weather right now.
Okay, so I hadn't planned on doing the water thing right off the bat, but that's good. And if the DPW gets back to you between now and the end of the show, we'll at least be able on Wednesday the 17th. Things could change by the time you hear this show on the 21st, but I don't think we're going to get any serious rain in the interim. And so just be careful with your water usage. it's always good to be moderately using that. On Monday, we will talk now about the rec department and the whole situation there, if you will. And I'm just reading the Herald's account of that. So back in March, town meeting, right after that, the election, etc., you announced that you would not be reappointing Kim Peters. So she'd been on the job for, I think, about 7 years. And things went from there. There was a committee that got appointed to look for a new rec department director or superintendent. And the other night, you announced that you had chosen April Chaffee to take over as the new superintendent. And the Rutland Board of Aldermen, and I don't know what the correct legal term is, but they took no action on your appointment. And so we seem to be in the middle of a legal, I don't want to say a battle, but a legal question. We don't currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, have a city attorney, right?
No, so we use outside counsel at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So basically what happened was, over the summer we had the search committee. The board made a motion and voted on bringing Kim back,
right?
Because I have a time limit, but their vote was an improper vote because they didn't follow the proper procedure and they didn't have enough votes to get that across. So on Monday night, when I presented my nomination, traditionally, as a tradition, they table the nomination. What the charter says, what the law says, is that I'll make my nomination at that board meeting, and at the following regular meeting, the board shall, and in legal terms, shall means the board must vote on that. So they'll still have to vote at the next meeting. They just chose not to table in this particular situation. So they'll have to take that vote up. At this point, I had some discussion with some of the board members. They feel that their vote was valid. I had to get multiple legal opinions because the first legal opinion wasn't taken as seriously. So I've got two legal opinions that say that the vote was invalid because the board president can't vote in certain circumstances. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're at now. So over the next 3 weeks, because we've got a little while till the next board meeting, we'll continue to have conversations, and we hope to see that April supported. April has done a phenomenal job. She took the reins of rec for most of the summer, had a great summer, very successful. She's worked with the city for many, many years, more than 2 decades. And she, as was stated at the meeting, not only is she the heir apparent, but she's got the skills and the effort, the knowledge and know how to do the job. And I think that there's plenty of support for April as a whole. So we'll see how it goes at the next board meeting.
Yeah, and again, published reports would have indicated, certainly Sharon Davis made the statement she didn't have any problem with April. So I think basically there are board members that do support her. Maybe all of them do, I don't know, because we haven't had a vote. But they didn't feel, at least some of them, that it was sort of legally okay to do that until they had the other piece settled.
That's right.
It's not settled yet. And I don't know how many attorneys the board consulted. I don't know how many you've consulted. But again, it seems to be we're caught in the middle of a legal issue.
It is. And, at this point, it's kind of semantics of operations, right? It's less about the rec director and more about what's right. And, listen, I am a mayor that if I have a legal binding, order from the board, I'm going to follow it. There's no question, right? But I don't have that. And I've got multiple lawyers that have said that, and I've got it documented. The board hasn't presented me with that at all. The board hasn't taken the city management to court, so to speak, right? You have to think about the board represents the citizens. The city is the operating body, so to speak. So there is a dividing line there, and it's hard, but this is just one of those things that, I have to do. My job is to operate the city to the best of my ability for and in the interest of the citizens. And I am doing that. And that's where our disagreement is on this legal item of was that vote valid or not? And it is very clear to my administration that vote was invalid, that it couldn't have been taken the way it was taken because they didn't follow the proper procedure. And not only that, but they didn't have enough votes to actually pass it that way. And we had, Brian, we have always proceeded from the very beginning that we needed to find a new rec director for specific reasons, and that's the process we've taken. So, like I said, we have a couple weeks to figure this out, and hopefully by the next Board of Aldermen meeting, everything's straightened out, and we'll have a new superintendent in place.
And my understanding is that Kim's already moved out of the area, so people can move back in too, but even if sort of the legal opinion goes the other way and the board vote is upheld and then she kind of gets her job back, maybe she'll want to come back, maybe she won't. I don't know, and whether or not that's even an issue, I don't know. But I did hear that she's moved away, and so yeah, I guess we'll see what happens in the next 3 weeks or so.
There you go.
So, okay. Let's move along. We normally talk a lot about housing on this show, and I know there was also another appointment that you made in terms of the landlady that has the place on Whale Street.
Yeah. So Claire
Purcell,
who actually her husband grew up in Rutland County, and went to Rutland High School, and they moved away and moved back. Claire and her husband have invested, and Claire is actually the primary focus on this. Invested in Rutland City, and finds it to be a great place to actually build her real estate business, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Ed Bove, who's my planner in the city, had recommended it. Claire for the Planning Commission, and we put Claire up, and there were, she didn't get enough votes to actually be on the commission, which is very interesting because the Planning Commission is it's a volunteer position. There's absolutely no pay for it. It's probably one of the most thankless jobs in the city because it's a lot of work. Yep. And we need planning commissioners right now. So I was actually surprised by the no votes. And the explanations, right? Oh, well, Claire's a developer. Well, we've already had developers that were approved unanimously by the board that have been on the Planning Commission in the past. One of the other ones was, I think one of the other things that was said in the paper was that, we didn't receive her resume. Well, Claire is very accessible. I had a conversation with Claire after the fact, and turns out that she didn't have any conversations with any of the aldermen. Nobody reached out to get that information. So, while in reality, the answers for why people voted no on Claire seem reasonable. There's probably they probably could have all been very easily answered, and all very well could have been acceptable answers just from the conversations I've had with Claire. She cares about our community. She's invested in it. She would absolutely have the ability to recuse herself from any vote that could have affected her personally. Like I said, we have other developers on the Planning Commission now that build homes in our city and have taken advantage of the benefits of doing business in Rutland. So some of those answers didn't make sense to me, and I think maybe there's something more political going on in all reality. That's my take on it. But having a conversation post-mortem with Claire about it, I think we're going to continue to look for additional commissioners, and we'll keep. Claire said she wants to help. She'll come to meetings, even not as a commissioner, to give her feedback and opinion. And that really, what that speaks to, Brian, for me, and the fact that Claire's willing to do that, even though she didn't get her appointment, she still wants to come, is that it really shows she cares. And what's so interesting is you've got someone who is living locally, albeit in Chittenden, but is living locally, wants to invest in our community, wants to do the work, and is willing to do what it takes. And that's very admirable in and of itself.
Now you can appoint her again, right?
I could. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you going to?
It's possible in the future. I think the concern of conflict of interest, I want to make sure that we have an answer for that. I don't think that Claire herself would ever put herself in that position. And we do have rules around conflict of interest. You have to recuse yourself. It's in our charter. It's very clear. And Claire would follow those processes, no question. But I want to make sure that, we put the pieces in place to make sure that we're doing what's right for Rutland. If those are the concerns from the board, then we have to address them. But like I said, this same board and some members on the same board, even the ones that have said, hey, I'm concerned about the conflict of interest, have approved developers that are living in and investing in and working in Rutland on development. So that, to me, it throws me a little bit, but I do think that we can take some steps to make sure that that's not a concern if Claire comes back up again.
Okay. So I know you had a meeting with the governor recently, and from what you told me, things went pretty well.
So, like you said, we're recording this on Wednesday the 17th, so it would have been about a week ago from the time we're recording it last Thursday. And I had reached out to his staff and said, look, I want to sit down and talk about what's happening in Rutland over the next year, especially as we come into the next legislative session. What are our priorities? How do they align with the administration's priorities? Because it actually turns out that, what Governor Scott is trying to do is very similar to what we're trying to do in Rutland, right? He wants to see the population grow. We want to see the population grow. He wants to see workforce development because we have an aging population. We want to see the same thing. So a lot of different initiatives in common. So I figured to take the opportunity to sit down and have that conversation with him on those topics. And we ran the gamut. We talked about all sorts of different things, everything from and we can dive into each of these subjects, but everything from the current situation with the unhoused population in our city, to what housing looks like, to, hey, we have a lot of properties in the city that are held by what's called patient capital. So investors with money that are waiting for the right deal to turn around and sell those properties. And sometimes they're not taking care of those properties. And we're going to try to find ways to incentivize people to, if they're going to hold the piece of property, to do what's right. This isn't for like your normal homeowner. Mm-hmm. This is for people like the beverage center, right? That's on the corner of 4 and 7. It's been there for years. It's an old defunct gas station and It looks like crap. And that's in all reality, that in our city isn't something that we want. So how do we incentivize at least the proper upkeep of that? So, discussions like that through the whole gamut. And what I found in the conversation was that it was, not only was it a great two-way conversation, and the governor had brought a couple of his staff members, but the administration of the state sees the benefit of Rutland being successful, right? We are the epicenter of Southern Vermont. Plain and simple. I mean, there's no better way to say it. And, there's a lot that goes on in this part of the state in Southern Vermont, but Rutland really is kind of the hub. The intersections of 4 and 7, the amount of traffic that comes through here, the way that tourism routes and commerce routes, we are the epicenter. So in order for the state to be successful, we need to be successful as well. So hand in hand, that conversation went really well, and I'd be happy to dive into any of these topics as we move along today.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was a lot more money available to facilitate a lot of what we're trying to do. There isn't right now. We are, we can get into the educational reform issue as well. And I think people should realize that whatever the legislature decide, well, first of all, there's a task force that's working supposedly on recommendations that will be available for the legislature in December and January. And we're hoping, at least I am, that there'll be actual boundaries set up by that task force that says, here's what the Rutland County district, if you will, is going to look like. Are there going to be 2 districts, 1, 3? I don't know. And then from that, we will begin work on how school boards will be organized, how many people will be on it, how they'll get elected, all that kind of stuff. And whatever we decide at this point won't be put into effect until fiscal 29, which is technically July of 28, which is not that far away, but it's still a couple years away.
Yeah.
So we're going to face something this year. We already have. I think most of the tax bills have gone out. I was very happy in Rutland Town to see my property tax rate dip a bit. I don't know that that's true for all the other, I'm sure it isn't, cities and towns in the county. Some of them probably went up some of them probably went down some. But that said, that was based on an investment by the legislature this year of $111 million of one-time money to buy that property tax rate down. We are going to have to do that, if we can, again next year, because whatever we decide to do with this reformation of the educational system will not take effect for at least 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 more years. So we're still going to be battling this. And that's going to grab so much of the attention and the funding away from other things that we, unfortunately, there's only so many taxes and so much revenue that's available, and you can't spread it out any more than we're spreading it. So I don't know what else is going to be available in terms of housing.
Yeah, in Rutland City, a lot of our residents, right, so our homestead rates, they saw the benefit of the tax rate going down, right? So while it wasn't as big as we would have liked, I'm sure, and it did go down or stay the same for most people. It didn't really go up. Non-homestead, so non-resident or business or second home or rental properties, they did go up for sure. And it's funny because I had moved across town. I sold my house and I moved across town, so I got the non-homestead rate for the house I'm living in now because just when you file your taxes and how that rate gets set, and it was a hit. And we are going to see that impact. It's tough. Rutland doesn't have a great tax rate. And this is something like all of the efforts we're putting in, right? Capital improvement plan, 1% option tax, the TIF district, all of these things will pay off in the long run and start to slow or reduce those rates, but it takes time. And these are things that should have been put in place 10, 15 years ago and haven't. So we're getting to that now. Looking at the education bill and what's going to be done, the commentary is all over the place. This is, what's being worked on by the task force right now isn't going to result in what we actually need, or consolidation is not going to happen fast enough, or this is going to take too long. So I'm really interested to see on the education side, which isn't necessarily related to what I do, but I'm very interested to see, what happens in the next legislative session with that, because it really will impact how taxpayers pay for that.
Yeah. Well, there's 11 people on it. There's a very wide divergence of backgrounds on it.
Yes.
There are retired superintendents. There are people that are still active on school boards. And then there are people that are just kind of there representing other factions. And unfortunately, what I'm learning is that the chairs of that task force seem, and I use the word seem, I'm not saying it actually is this way, as though they would prefer not doing much and getting to the end of the summer and then the fall and basically saying to the legislature, we tried our best, we couldn't come to an agreement, now you guys have to take it back. And I'm afraid that's, I don't know, maybe there'll be 2 or 3 different recommendations, but I keep hearing from people that are closer to that than I am that there hasn't been a lot of progress made so far.
Yeah, I think the only representation we have on that task force from Southern Vermont is Dave Walk, and it's great to have him on there. I mean, what a great plethora of experience to bring to that task force. But you're also up against a lot of Northern Vermont.
It's top heavy for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And that's going to be challenging. It'd be disappointing to me. So I'm on a task force, a different task force. I'm on something called the Regional Dispatch, Public Safety Regional Task Force, which is for regional dispatch. And we are a very active task force. Now, mind you, it's taken a long time to get to where we're at today, trying to talk about how we can handle emergency service dispatch in the state of Vermont in the most cohesive and consolidated way possible is what this task force is about. But there's a lot of responsibility. You're a legislator, right? You're up there. You take the data that's given to you from these task force or from these studies and make decisions with that data. So if this task force isn't there doing their job to gather that information, sending it back to you is not going to do anything. Right? He's just going to put more work on your shoulders and slow the process.
Yeah, and it will take up more time in the legislative session next year than it could have if and I'm not saying they won't. I'm just saying I think they've had 2 meetings. And in essence, one of them was pretty much just deciding when we're going to meet again.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of work done. And I don't know, all of a sudden maybe, someone will put their foot on the accelerator and they'll come out with some very good recommendations. I don't know, but we'll wait and see in January. And the other thing that people don't realize perhaps is if the legislature does not approve what they come up with, that act, that legislative statute gets repealed.
Yeah.
And in essence, we start all over again anyway. So that said, that's down the road. And unfortunately, there's not much I can do about it. We'll wait and see. We do have 2 members of the Rutland County Senate delegation on Senate Education Committee. Senator Weeks and Senator Williams are there. and they may have a little bit better idea if they're talking to any of their colleagues about what that task force is doing. Anyway, we're talking with Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges. We need to take our first break here on Catamount Community Connection, and we will do that and be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, our weekly public affairs program here. We spend an hour each week talking with someone different about different issues that come up and are being investigated, if you will, by both the legislature and then local boards of aldermen and select boards. And today we're talking to Mike Doenges, who's the mayor of the city of Rutland. And we've already talked about a couple of things. The rec department superintendent issue yet to be solved. And I wanted to talk, because you mentioned we had a little, well, you did, I didn't, meeting with the governor, although I do see him on occasion. And maybe some legislative public safety issues that could be coming up.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about, right, is if you look at the data in Rutland City, 85% or more, depending on the data and when it's collected, because it's kind of a moving target, of our petty thefts, of our minor crimes, are directly related to those with a substance use disorder, right? Like directly related, Brian. And we look at the drugs in our community and the ones that are really, heroin used to be the word. Now it's fentanyl and xylazine. And we had a great conversation about recovery and how to put the right recovery plans in place and how to pay for them. So typically, for heroin and other drugs, and heroin might even be borderline, you want 30 days in a place where you can be separate from that and work through the process. Well, with xylazine, the recovery time is like 60, 90. There are longer periods of time the data is showing. And how do we get that in place? That's great for those who are currently struggling with addiction and struggling with those things, is how do we deal with recovery? But one of the other sides of the coin, in all reality, is the prevention of sales of these drugs in our community. And the state of Vermont, we don't have a lot of teeth, right? Legislative, for example, right? If there's what would we consider low level drug dealer, so somebody who's just selling drugs, these highly illegal, highly lethal drugs, and they get caught, there's not a lot of teeth. There's not a lot of for these judges to sentence, and for a sentence for a long period of time. And usually, sometimes, not usually, but sometimes, people who are doing the selling are also the people who are using, and they might be selling to feed a habit. So when you look at that challenge, that there's no teeth, which makes it harder for the police to catch them, makes it harder for the police to hold them, makes it harder for police to process the higher level drug dealers, the ones that are doing the distribution, because they don't have informants, they don't have these other things. It makes it really difficult to fight drug trafficking in our city. Really, really difficult because of the way the laws are written. So a piece of legislation, and I gave you a copy of it last year during one of our things, that I would like to see get some attention in Montpelier this year, and I shared this information with the governor. I still have to send him the legislation. Is what we would consider an escalating set of minimums. So think about, the example I like to use is think about DUI. So people who are driving under the influence. If you get caught driving under the influence, there is a minimum punishment. And with that minimum punishment, for the first offense, there's only, there's so much you do. Maybe there's community service. Maybe there's a penalty. Maybe you lose your license. And then the second time you do it, it's more severe. And then the third time you do it, it's more severe. I'm not talking about this legislation for people who use these substances. I'm talking about this legislation for people who are selling these substances. Fentanyl, xylazine, and heroin all are lethal in the right doses, meaning people will die and have died. And the overdoses in Rutland and the overdoses across Vermont have only continued to increase, right? And so these lethal drugs and the people who are selling these lethal drugs aren't being held accountable, plain and simple, that's the word. They aren't being held accountable for their actions in selling these lethal substances. So if you were to go and sell poison to a kid at a school, right, it'd be a different scenario, right? So how do we address that? So this is, listen, I'm not a lawyer. I haven't worked in the judicial system, and I know there's a lot of opinions around minimums. But I'm not saying just straight regular minimums and everybody gets the same thing. I'm saying start with something really really deterministic, but maybe not as severe. That first offense, here's the minimum that you get, and have a bottom, have a floor. Because every time I talk to these judges, I always hear the same thing. We need the guidance from the legislature on how they want us to sentence. We have to have that. We give them maximums, but the minimums, there are none. So they need that guidance. So if they're asking you, Brian as a senator, or Mary as a rep, how they should go about enacting these laws, having a minimum sentence and holding people accountable gives them clear guidance and doesn't let people off the hook. And, we discussed this and I can't tell you whether the governor would support this or not because there's a lot of, political pieces to the puzzle, but letting him know that this is something that we're looking at so that we can fight drug trafficking in Rutland is so important. And it's something I'll be working with the state's attorney on and with the judicial committees to try to make sure that if not this version of the bill, or if not the language that I'm proposing, definitely some harsh penalties to hold people accountable for selling lethal drugs in our community, Brian.
Yeah, and I would definitely support that. Tom Burdett from West Rutland is vice chair of House Judiciary, and so he would be a key guy to get it begun in that chamber. And obviously in the Senate, we don't have anybody from Rutland County on Judiciary, but I can speak with the 5 members of that committee. The other thing that has come up in the past, and this, by the way, will be a year when we can introduce bail reform. And it takes a constitutional amendment at this point, and you can only do that every other biennium. So this is a year where we could do that, and we could make it a new bail situation. Right now, the only way that a judge can impose bail is not because it's a serious crime or they think it's public safety or that kind of thing. It's only to prevent, in their minds, the defendant from returning to court. So, risk of flight, that's the only thing right now that a judge can use as a reason for not imposing bail.
That's right. I think maybe not in our state, but in other states, it's not just risk of flight, but it's actually failure to appear is the language. And that's so important a distinction. Because risk of flight means, hey, you're in Rutland, you just didn't show up for court, so I don't need to impose bail, right? But failure to appear means you haven't shown up, and now we're going to hold you to make sure you show up. And again, Vermont may be different than other states, but there are states that have that are allowing, that will allow bail for failure to appear. And that's an important part because people don't show up for court. We have people with 20, 30 dockets that still don't show up, and we have to find them. And then it's lucky if we can hold them. So again, it's just one of those things. You're hitting the nail on the head. It's one of those things that you need to give the judiciary. The judiciary will follow suit with the guidance that the legislature gives them, and they need to be given that guidance.
And each year we have occasion to attend, cases in court, and we usually get to talk to the judge back in his or her chambers. And I know they're frustrated. There's no doubt about it. And I know also that Ian Sullivan, our state's attorney in Rutland County, who does a great job, and so do our judges, is also very frustrated with the frequent flyers, if you will, who seem to appear weekly in front of a judge. And really, there's not much they can do right now. So, yeah, I would definitely support any sort of reform like that. I'm pretty sure the governor will, too. Rutland's not unique. I did not vote for the, I'm not sure what the nice term is in Burlington, where you can go and shoot up and...
Oh, the safe injections.
Yeah, I didn't think that was a solution to this problem at all. And in fact, they've all of a sudden they got a problem finding a community that wants to do it. So they can't find anybody that wants to, we put money into it. We put $1 million, I think. And to my knowledge, it's not open yet. It isn't working.
Well, I still think the laws don't really allow it to happen, right? Because some of the laws didn't pass. If you look at the studies on this, so they've done this in Toronto, in Canada. They've done this in a couple of other places.
New York City, I think.
Yeah, well, New York City's doing it legally, not legally, right? So it's happening against the law, so to speak.
Right.
And in some cases it makes sense, right? And when they talk, when the advocates for this, they talk about prevention. They talk about prevention of death, not prevention of utilization of the drug, but prevention of death. And from a prevention of death standpoint, I'm sure that it works. And preventing somebody from using a drug is an awful hard thing to do, especially if they want to do it. But allowing a safe injection site, and we had these discussions, is this something that Rutland's interested in? The answer is no, because we don't, at least the broader spectrum of people that live here, they don't want that in their community. And I think that's been reflected in the lack of communities willing to stand up and say, we'll take one.
Yeah, I mean, I was very happy to vote no on that. I didn't think it was a good idea. I still don't. I won't vote for it again, and we'll see where it goes. I don't know if there's anything on the horizon this year with respect to that. I do think there'll be more public safety legislation introduced and to make more people more accountable, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, we've got a president that is bombing boats that are, coming into the American coast, and, say what you will, it seems to be working. I think the drug cartels are kind of scratching their head, wondering what to do.
Yeah, I can't comment on the national scene.
I know.
But what I can say, though, is, Brian, in reality, again, I want to be really careful to say this. Those who have substance use disorder or are struggling with substance abuse, that is one thing. And the way we handle that is through prevention and treatment. To the best of our ability, we want to help people get to where they need to be so that they can get stable and they don't have to rely on external substances. For the people selling in our community, we don't want this here. Plain and simple. And we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure you can't sell your drugs here.
Well said. I know you also talked to the governor about what are called opportunity zones, and I'm not really familiar with what that is.
Yeah, so in legislation back in 2018, in national legislation, there was call it a potential tax benefit for those who, had let's say that you had a $10 million profit in your business, right, or your personal wealth, and you would have had to pay capital gains tax on that year. The administration had established a way to take those monies and invest them for a period of time into what they called opportunity zones. So zones that were designated by each state, by their governors, that allowed for private investment tax-free. Eventually, you had to take that original capital gain out and pay the taxes on it, right? This is all in legislation. I don't want to get too technical. But then any capital gains moving forward would remain tax-free. So let's say, hypothetical, somebody were to take their money, invest it in building an apartment complex, take that out, pay taxes on it later. The profits from that apartment complex in the future would be tax-free for a period of time. It's there's years and dates on it. So this is very big benefit. This is the same when you hear about tax credits. It's a very similar thing to a tax credit. If you've ever gotten a rebate on your taxes, like a lot of people got COVID rebates and child tax credit, that's the same thing, but it's for businesses that have a profit so that they don't pay capital gains tax up front. And what that does is that allows them to invest in certain areas. Well, opportunity zones were designated around what you would consider a qualified census tract, or areas that needed the most amount of investment, areas that had a little bit higher poverty rates, or areas that struggled from an economic standpoint. That's where those opportunity zones were supposed to be designated. That all expires at the end of 2026. And in the big, beautiful bill, love it or hate it, one of the things that's in there is these new rural opportunity zones. And some people are calling it Opportunity Zone 2.0. Some people call it rural OZs. But what it does is it reestablishes these opportunity zones, and they're permanent now. So it's not temporary like the previous version. It's permanent. So while we look at the federal government reducing more and more of the grants that we've been getting, right? And what that is, right, so people would get taxed, their money would go into the federal government would say, okay, we have this cash, let's distribute it for these purposes, right? Now, you have a Republican administration saying, we still need those investments in our community, but instead of having those investments come through the government, they can go directly into these zones through these tax breaks. This is a way that Rutland can see investment and grow through using non-grant sourced funding. So we have been working at the city, both the board and my office, to make Rutland the most developable municipality in Vermont, right? We've been trying to eliminate 3-acre rule challenges. We've been trying to deal with our stormwater, our wastewater. We've reduced our permit fees. We've applied for Tier 1A status so that we don't have to deal with Act 250. We've lobbied for rules and regulations that allow Rutland City, the central municipality, the urban municipality of this area, to grow. where Rutland Town's going to have a different set of rules and Mendon a different set of rules. We want to focus, as we are the city, on development and growth. And we've got room to do it, especially if we grow up, and we've got the infrastructure to do it. And in order to actually bring that tax rate that we were talking about earlier that's high down, there's only one way to do that. Well, two, but the only real way to do that, because we already run the city on a pretty shoestring budget, is to increase the amount of tax-paying properties, period, end of sentence. So in the national government or in the state government, what you want to do is increase jobs, because that increases who helps pay the bill. In a local government, you have to increase the amount of properties that pay that tax so that we all share in the load, so everybody's taxes go down. And that's just the basic math of it. So what opportunity zones allow us to do, and the reason I had this conversation with the governor, is he gets to pick, his team gets to pick these areas. In Rutland, 3/4 of Rutland City have been an opportunity zone. But with this new legislation and the way that it's going to work in the future, at least for the next 15 years, is that these new rural opportunity zones, which Rutland is still considered rural, are ways that private investment is going to come in and get those versions of what used to be tax credits and grants now is going to look like OZ investment. So we want to be ready for that, and we want to see that private investment. We want to see those private dollars come and help us develop our communities, because when you build a $35 million apartment complex, the math doesn't work out when you have to pay all these federal taxes on that income. But when you don't, and when you're able to generate that, the property taxes are there, and you create these housing living units, you create jobs, and it all works out in the end. So it's a very good opportunity, not to play pun on the word, but it's a good opportunity for the city of Rutland to focus on being capable of receiving those developers to come in and invest in our community.
We're talking to Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges today on Catamount Community Connection. We're going to take our second break, and when we come back, we have a couple of events coming up in October that we just want to reference. One of them, well, they're both annual events for sure and fun. And then we want to talk, I think, about the TIF district vote, which is coming up October 7th as well. And we will take a break and come back with Mayor Doenges in just a moment. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection. I'm your weekly host, Brian Collamore, and today we are talking with Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges. We've talked about a number of issues. I did want to just mention, for those of you that may be planning ahead a little bit, the 64th Annual Art in the Park Fall Foliage Festival is coming up in the city, October 11th and 12th. And then the other event is the Rutland Halloween Parade on October 25th. We have also some vintage market days, October 10th through the 12th. That's down at the Vermont State Fairgrounds. And also Vermont Symphony Orchestra's Jukebox Strength and Hope concert at the Paramount Theater on October 17th. So those are 3 or 4 events that you can put on your calendar and plan if you want. I did want to at least spend a few minutes on the TIF district as we get closer to October 7th. I do have a letter that we've drafted on behalf of the whole Rutland legislative delegation. So I think there are 17 or 18 members in that, and all of them unanimously, just like the Board of Aldermen, have signed on to this and support at least asking voters in the city only. This will not be a countywide vote. This is only going to take place in the city, but to at least consider supporting it. We can't really tell you how to vote, but we would like you to at least encourage you to consider voting yes on the TIF district. We've talked a lot about it on this show with the mayor, with the board president, Dave Allaire, with Lyle Jepson from Cedar, with Hal from the Rutland Partnership, or the Downtown Rutland Partnership. I think everybody sort of understands what it is now. It's not going to increase your taxes. It is a bond. It will have to be paid back, but we're going to use what is going to be the added value of that property to pay back the loan. And so I don't know where we are. I know in the last week or so, Mayor, I've seen some lawn signs go up
Yeah, so, we have rules about when the signs can go up, a certain amount of time before the vote. But the signs are out there. Some of them say vote TIF. Some of them say vote yes on TIF. So depending on where you're getting the sign from and who's putting the sign up. But the idea basically being, you hit the nail on the head. This is what allows the city to invest in infrastructure around the project. In this case, the first project is the hotel downtown. But in order for that hotel to go there, we need to fix the sidewalks, we need to fix the water, so the freshwater plumbing, the wastewater plumbing, and the stormwater plumbing, and then the streetscape itself. So there's a lot of work that needs to go in to make this possible, and typically that would be something that would just need to come out of the general fund budget. In this scenario, we don't have to do that. In this scenario, we have a TIF district, we have our first phase filing approved, and if this bond passes, we'll be able to make those investments, and you will not see your property taxes increase because of that. And it's rare and unique that we get to do this, but it's a fantastic opportunity. And as Peter Fagan says, we can have a pit for another 50 years or we can pass this bond. So that's where we're coming from in the discussion is we want people to get out and vote. And you said it perfectly. This got unanimous support from our delegation. It's got unanimous support from the board. It's got unanimous support from my administration and the people in the city. We've had a few questions and concerns come to meetings, which is great. I love it when people are trying to dig in and understand the value. At the end of the day, this is another one of those things that down the line, after the hotel's built and the TIF that's been paid off, those tax dollars that were generated by that increment will actually go back to the general fund. And you'll see at it is the 20-year mark, but you'll see at the 20-year mark, taxes go down again. So the more we can continue to invest in the city, the more we can divvy up that load of the school taxes and the city taxes, the better we're going to be. But then you have things like the TIF district that are just going to add this mass amount of value. And to see that investment, this hotel start the investment, it's only the beginning. So really excited about the TIF district. And
being fairly fiscally conservative, I sort of had to be educated about how this works, because the initial reaction to it was, I'm not voting for any bond, borrowing money I'm going to have to pay back. But again, I've been convinced, I've been educated, and people should do that if they have any sort of hesitancy about voting on October 7th, one way or the other. You could certainly vote no, but I'm hoping that enough people will have learned about it and seen the benefit of it down the road. We have examples of where it's worked in other communities. St. Albans is a great example of something that never, ever, ever could have happened unless the TIF project was approved. And I don't think there's anybody up there that regrets anything that's gone on there. They've transformed St. Albans.
St. Albans is transformed because of TIF, because they did it right. And we're actually using St. Albans as the model, right? And we look at St. Albans and what they've done. One of the things, Dominic Cloud, who's the city manager up there and has been the TIF champion. And now we have Sean Atkins at the RRA. And if Sean hasn't come in on your show yet, we absolutely need to get him in. But Sean, who was working for St. Albans Town, the city manager up there, understands this completely, and he's going to help us run this, you look for market failure. And when you have programs like TIF, focusing on market failure is exactly where you need to be. And in this case, we've had an empty pit for 50 years. If that's not a market failure, I don't know what is. Yeah. So in being able to leverage the investment and put the pieces in place so that we have a hotel, 4 stories of hotel, 2 stories of apartments, a restaurant, a rooftop bar in what would normally just sit as a pit, think about the implication of that. So either we do the TIF and we get that benefit, or we don't, and we have a pit that doesn't generate any new income for us, or doesn't help anybody reduce their tax bill, right? So no negative impact to the taxpayer whatsoever, only positive impact if we get this done.
Now, you mentioned the lawn signs, and I don't know if they're available somewhere to get, or if people wanted to get them, what would they do?
Yeah, you can pick up lawn signs at Cedar, which is on Merchants Row, or you can stop by the RRA, which is in City Hall. It's upstairs on the second floor. They're within the city. They're not, they're a different organization, but and you can pick up lawn signs there as well.
You mentioned town manager. I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention Dave Atherton, who was the town manager recently in Killington. Earlier last week, Dave passed. And I had a lot of respect for him. He was, before that, I know he was in Pittsford, and I think Brandon, maybe.
Yeah, Pittsford and Brandon. And prior to that, for those in Proctor, he used to own the West Street Market in Proctor. And, him and his wife, Heather, absolutely incredible people. A lot of thoughts and prayers for real for that family. Dave was an amazing human, and I really enjoyed getting to work with him, and he'll be missed.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left, maybe 6 if we really push it. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to talk about? I don't know if you've heard back from our folks at the DPW or the water yet, but I'm not trying to cast any sort of black cloud on anything. It just seemed to me like, and I haven't been to the reservoir in a long time. In fact, we have, by the time you hear this, I've already done it, so who cares? Friday, we were going to go up to the water treatment plant, and I was just curious why nobody, even at the state level, I mean, the drought is throughout the whole state. It isn't just Rutland. But nobody has said, hey, by the way, start saving water. Don't use as much, I don't know how you do that. I mean, I know what you don't do. You don't want to go out and water your lawn. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But, I guess I'm asking, how big a problem is it? How serious is it? And what can we do about it?
So the flows right now that we're seeing, just a quick note, look okay. I mean, DPW's, the memo I got back is they're watching it. They're concerned, and they are going to, they're looking forward to the tour. And, Tom had just said, wants to discuss it before, during, or after the tour. But, it's something that we're watching. There is rain in the forecast next week, and that'll help us. The Rutland City, our water system, which we share some with Rutland Town, they use some of our water. We get our water from Mendon Brook.
Right.
That feeds into our reservoir, then it's treated through our slow sand filter. It's some of the cleanest water in the state, actually. We have to keep an eye on it because that brook could essentially get dry. But right now, we're good. We also have an alternate source that comes more from the Chittenden side, Chittenden Pittsford side, that in the worst case scenario we can switch to. So I think we're okay at the moment. But again, this is Wednesday. Maybe on Friday you'll get a slightly different.
We're recording this, folks, again on Wednesday the 17th. It'll air. You will hear it on the 21st. So in those 3 or 4 intervening days, something could have happened that would change something that we're saying. I usually try to pick topics that aren't that timely. But you never know. And of course, the worst thing would be, because we're so dry right now, is if all of a sudden the faucet got turned on and it just was like a fire hose worth of water. We don't want that either, because it would be amazing how quickly we would go from drought to flood too.
Right. Have you ever tried to pour water on a potted plant that you haven't watered in months, right?
Yeah.
It just sits on top.
Exactly.
That's the same thing that would happen. That hydrophobic nature of the dirt would cause flooding. So we want a nice drizzle on day one, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, or even if it went a couple days, maybe it goes 8 hours one day and stops, and then has a chance to soak in, and then start it again. We also did mention very quickly the 3-acre rule. I am still working to do something with that. The 3 senators and Representative Chris Pritchard met with the agency secretary, Julie Moore, the Agency of Natural Resources, last week. And she is also very concerned with the rollout of this 3-acre rule. And she has promised to send us recommendations to at least address some of the concerns that we have. I'm not saying... I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to grandfather everybody that already owns a piece of property. And then if it's a new development, going in ahead of time, that's one thing. But many people, including a lot of people in Rutland, bought properties 10, 12, 15 years ago and had no idea that this was going to happen. So I'd like to grandfather, I think there's 700 plus properties on the western side of the state that all feed into Lake Champlain. And I'd like to just, take them out of the mix, but I know that's not going to happen. But she talked about, for instance, with the mitigation, being able to help a little bit more and not forcing people to go off-site in order to fix a problem.
Right.
And I think that would be helpful. But more to come on that.
I think, one of the big challenges, Brian, is if we don't figure out something with the grandfathering, I think you might see some lawsuits from these property
you
owners.
will.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so for those who don't know, this is the EPA said to the state of Vermont, you're going to have to fix this problem. And the state of Vermont came up with their kind of version of resolution for this. And this is where we're at today.
Yep.
But there's got to be some administrative adjustments made because like you look at the fairgrounds, you look at other properties in the city. These are people that have owned these properties, some of them for 50 years, the fair for 180,
Yep.
right? And they didn't know 180 years ago. They didn't know 50 years ago that this was going to come up. And while we understand the need to keep our lakes and waterways clean and have a low impact, you got to have to do it in a way that's financially feasible. Otherwise, you're just going to end up closing up shop. And imagine a $2 million bill to fix this problem. And then that closes the business. Well, they're not going to fix the problem, are they?
That's right.
So the problem will still exist, and that's the real trouble.
The fair's estimate was closer to $3 million.
Yeah.
And it would literally just put them out of business. There's no way. So we have to come up with a solution, and I'm hoping that Secretary Moore can come up with something. I think she was sincere. I think she was very concerned, and we made it very clear that we were not happy with what we did back in, I don't know when it was, 10 years ago, I think, is when the 3-acre rule went into effect, or at least the beginnings of that. Okay, so we now have a minute left. I don't know if there's anything else left that you haven't talked about.
I'll just say on that to finish that topic off. The city is looking at ways to help mitigate that. Right, we have a stormwater system. Is there something that we can do? We continue to research it, and hopefully that'll be if the state can't budge, or if the EPA can't budge, or if there's no fix. As part of being a developable city, we have to be ready to adjust to those things. So hhopefully we can put things in place to ease that tension on our property owners too.
The one good thing is we do have a new EPA director with the change in administration. Lee Zeldin is now the EPA secretary nationally, and I don't think he has the same outlook on this as his predecessor. So that may be a good sign for Vermont to be able to work to get something done that maybe we couldn't have a couple of years ago.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Hey,
pleasure as always.
My pleasure. We've been talking to Rutland City Mike Doenges, and we appreciate his taking time out. And we will have him back for sure. We like to get him every month or so and keep you informed about what's going on. And we will see all of you next week here on Catamount Community Connection.